What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So, come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde, and boy, do we have a special guest. My man, my brother from another mother, Marko, the main man, Gargenta, is in the house. What's up, brother?
How's it going? Good to see you.
Oh, man, I'm so fucking pumped that you're here right now. This is like, most people don't know this, but so you're going to learn that I have known Marko for a long time. And so I was like, man, I know I've asked him to be on the show a bunch of times. It just hasn't happened. And then I'm really busy right now, and I'm like, fuck, dude, I don't know. I'm like short. I don't have normally I have 3 or 4 months of shows like recorded, and I'm like 4 weeks of shows, and I'm like, dude, I'm gonna go to all my homies who should have already done the show and get them to do the show now. So I'm like, this is gonna go out quick, Marko. Normally I record these things, they go out like 3 months later. You're just gonna go out in like 3 weeks. So, dude, I'm so pumped to have you there, man. You're such a stud. Thank you for coming on my show today, man. This is gonna be a lot of fun.
Of course, and sorry for such a delay. I think you asked me in the very beginning when you just started the show to be on it, and for some reason or another it just never happened. So I was thinking I was probably one of the last of your long-term friends that haven't done the show yet. So here I am.
The numbers have dwindled, and Marko's one of my more interesting friends, which is kind of funny that he hasn't been on. But here we are, man. So okay, I'm gonna give the audience a little bit of background. So I met Marko 2007. Is that right? Is that when you joined the forum?
Something like that, yeah.
And so we've been in the same CEO forum for 17 years. And dude, we like one of Marko. I'm gonna have him talk about it on the show, but he does epic shit. Like one of his like mantras in life is do epic shit. So I've gotten to like not only do a ton of epic shit with this guy, but actually watch him do epic shit. So he's just one of these people that like is a life maximizer. Just really, it's a joy to both watch and be involved in some of the epic shit you do. But we've been in the same CEO forum now since 2007. It's now 2024 for people that can't do math. That's 17 years. And we've like, he's the only person in my life that I've actually like influenced enough to actually do the MIT with me. So I talk about MIT on the show all the time, and I influenced him to do that. And then we're in the same like MIT alumni group together. So, which means we do epic shit together like once a year, like outside of my CEO forum. So, besides that, man, we've gone to Asia together. We've done intergalactic stuff that we'll talk about on the show a little bit together. And dude, like he's like one of my best friends. So I'm pumped to have you here, man. Do you mind if I do your formal bio and then we'll get started on the show? Is that cool?
Yeah, go for it.
So outside of being like one of my closest homies, Marko is the CEO of Plus Plus, which is a software as a service company, specializes in people management, learning and development. I'm actually an investor in the company. That's how much I believe in what he's doing. But he's been a serial entrepreneur, total life maximizer, was the director of Twitter University by way of selling his last company, Americana, to Twitter. I think what was that back in like, when did you guys sell to Americana? Like 2010?
2013, yeah. So
yeah, sold his company to Twitter, crushed it there, ran Twitter University. The Plus came out of that. Lifelong entrepreneur, has done a ton of other stuff outside of those two, but those are his two big ones. And just crushing it in life, like great dad, just all the amazing things that you'd want. A good friend, and man, so pumped to have you here, my brother. It's just it's been it's amazing. I've been doing the show for 4 years now. It took 4 years to get you on, so you missed the phase where I sang to my friends. I don't know what I was saying you now that we're what song should I have sang you if you came on?
I have no idea, but I do remember you used to sing. Yeah, I think you made people sing as well, and that's like
I'd have them sing. I would have you guys sing with me. I would have said it would have been some like it would have been Tiesto. Let's get down to business. Let's get down to business. I would have
I
sing
just
that
saw
song.
Tiesto like when last weekend? No, the weekend before.
Dude,
In Vegas. Yeah.
that's all. I love Tiesto. I've seen him in Vegas a couple times too. So, dude, well, dude, welcome to the show. I'd love to have it. You know, we love origin stories here. By the way, like my bio of him was just me going quick, and me like he's my homie, so I'm just like going. I'm giving you guys the shorthand. Like this guy's like crushing life in every capacity. And so when we start getting into it, like this is a person, like if you whatever you're doing, if you're driving in your car right now, you should say to yourself, "Hey, I'm going to listen to Darius." By the way, I've never even said this to anybody ever when they come on the show, but because I know you so well, I'm going to say this to the audience. If you're busy and you can't take notes, you should say to yourself, "Hey, I need to bookmark this episode so I can go listen to it again and take notes." So just know that that's the type of shit you're gonna be learning from Marko today. So, dude, I'd love if you wouldn't mind, like, give us some of the origin story because you have a pretty cool origin story. I'd love to hear, like, give you the audience some of where you got to, how you've gotten to where you got to, but just kind of give us an overview, like, give us some of the origin story.
Sure, and there's always like, what do I start, right? So I immigrated to Canada. I'll start with that. When I was a teenager, I was 17 in Serbia, and it was during the war there, and I was getting to the age where I might have been drafted into the army, and I was like, screw this, not my war. So my family got green cards to Canada, moved there. And so that was the first sort of like, oh my God, there's a whole other world experience, right? Like the life was like fundamentally different. And so that kind of blew my mind, got me really hungry. That's that whole sort of immigrant animal instincts, if you will, right? And then I dropped out of, I never finished high school. I guess that's one interesting fact. I dropped out of high school because I
didn't know that.
Yeah. I don't have a high school diploma. Hopefully, you still accept me as a buddy.
I respect you even more. But so I have a quick question on this. So because I don't think people actually realize what, like, for especially if people are younger, they may not realize. So Serbia was having a civil war, right? This is like the Kosovo War, right? Like back in like the early 90s. I didn't realize. So did you speak English when you moved to Canada, or were you like was that like a second language that took a minute to learn?
It was, I studied in school, but like I wouldn't be able to. Like I remember on the flight over, we were like, how do we ask for a Coca-Cola from the flight attendant? And that was that was hard. So like that's how much English I knew at the time. So not really. I understood some. Watched a lot of American movies as a kid. So
and so when you were living in Serbia, having grown up there, like you grew up there till you're 17. How was life there for the first, what age did the war start when you were in Serbia? How old were you?
I mean, life was fun. Like a lot of, as a kid, as a teenager, we had all the freedom, relatively good standard of living. Life was fun up until the Yugoslavia kind of started falling apart, and we started having the wars in Bosnia and Croatia, Kosovo, and all that. And if you remember, it was Milosevic at the time that was running the country. It's kind of like I compare it to Russia and Ukraine right now, somewhat, right? And it was a shit show. It was not a war that's not a war. In which I may have to partake and don't believe in, right? So it was kind of like that.
What part? What part of Serbia did you guys live in? Did you guys live in Belgrade?
Yeah, just outside in a small town called Pančevo.
Yeah. How big was the town that you grew up in?
Like I think a couple 100,000 people, but it was very industrial, sort of like Belgrade was fun. Pančevo wasn't. It was kind of like a dirty, smoky industrial town across the river. So, yeah.
And so when you moved to Canada, what part of Canada did you move to? Toronto? Is that right?
Yeah, went to Toronto. Yeah.
Did you guys have family there, or why did you guys pick Toronto?
No, my uncle immigrated, did the same thing maybe a month ahead of us. So we had somebody to pick us up at the airport, and we had a apartment on which we kind of slept on the floor for first couple of days. And it was really interesting, like, immigrating, like there was no flight zone over Serbia. So you couldn't just go to the airport, get a flight and fly. We had to take a bus in the middle of the night go east to Bulgaria and from there fly, right? And it was just this sketchy sort of immigrant story. You pack all your belongings in like, what's the maximum, 20 kilos per person or something like that. So we would like, everyone would have this like immigrant bags with like 20 kilos worth of like life possessions, right? And we would like sneak into the bus in the middle of the night and like cross east to fly west, and that's kind of like landed in Toronto. I had no idea what Canadians look like. I remember at the airport, like my brother and I were like, are Canadians, do they speak funny? Right. So I remember seeing a guy at the airport in Bulgaria. He had like a little, Canadians always have a little flag, right? I was like, he's a Canadian, let's go check him out, right? Like, he seemed like a cool dude and like no real like funky accent. And all that. So I was like, I think we're going to a cool place. And then what did I know about Canada? Not much, other than it's remote and it's cold, right? Like grizzly bears came to mind, right? So we land in Toronto and it's August, and I remember they open up the door of the airport. And it's the most humid summer I've ever experienced. It was like 100 degrees, super humid, hot, and I was like, wow, like I expected Canada to be cold, right? And then I remember we're driving down this freeway, and I've never seen a bigger freeway in my life. 401 in Toronto. It's like it's kind of like 20 plus lanes when you kind of collect, do all the lanes across in both directions. It was just, I was blown away. It was just out of this world kind of experience for me, immigrating or coming there as a kid first time.
So you got there, you were 17 years old. How old was your brother Sasha? Was he 15?
He was 15, yeah.
And so you had one bag. Do you remember like what you chose as your possessions to bring over?
I don't remember that, but I do remember like the funny stories. So I got super hungry. I was like, oh my God, like I saw these cars, the American cars, like I saw a Pontiac, for the first time. I was like, wow, these cars are huge. And like, I can drive now and legally, right? And I so wanted to get a car and like be able to afford one and be able to drive. So the following day, like I walk up on the floor of my uncle's apartment. The following day, I would go downstairs and find one of those like newspapers with like job ads, right? And I found, and we still didn't have our all our paperwork squared away. It was like took a couple of days, but I found a job that you would meet at a certain spot at the flower shop. They would put you in the back of a U-Haul, a van, drop you off somewhere, right? And with a bucket of roses, and you would sell the roses. And so I was like, I'm going to do that, right? So this is the day 2, right? In Toronto. Don't know anybody, right? Don't know the city. Don't know anything. Don't speak English. So I go, jump into the back of a U-Haul truck. They dropped me off in front of this place called the Eaton Center. It was at the time the largest, I think, mall in all of North America, like just a huge shopping place, right? Super busy in the summer. And they dropped me off at the corner of the biggest mall with a bucket of roses, right? And so I'm there like trying to sell these roses. Meanwhile, my parents were kind of, they didn't know where I was, and they were randomly touring Toronto. They ran into me. They're like, what the hell? You can imagine their surprise finding me on a street corner. So long story short is like, I worked 8 hours. I made $8. And I was so hungry that I think I spent like $6 on an overpriced hot dog. And a can of soda, right? Like I was super driven, but I was quickly realized that there's got to be easier ways to make money. So
yeah, man, I've known Marko for almost 20 years. I didn't know any of this. And so, did your folks have any money, or were they able to get money out of the country, or was it really like a struggle?
Yeah, we, one of the conditions of getting paperwork for Canada is you had to, not have a criminal record, be well educated, but also have some initial cash so you can kind of get going. Like, they were looking for families that have a high chance of success. And my dad used to do some engineering work in Libya at the time. He was sort of like in the oil and refinery sort of industry. And so we had some US dollar stash. So that's one of the, so we had, what would be equivalent to, like, say, $10,000 in our pocket. So not totally poor. We had some cash coming in.
And so your folks got settled in. You were basically almost done with high school. So you drop out of high school. And how did you get? Kind of tell us a little bit about the university story, because you obviously ended up at. I mean, I know the story a little bit about where you went to school, but tell us. I didn't know that you had dropped out of high school. Tell me about how did you end up in university?
Yeah, so I went to high school. So I was supposed to join grade 12 in grade 10 in Ontario. And Ontario has 13 grades, right? And so I went to grade 10. Meanwhile, I took all the classes for grade 12 and 13, and I had something like 150% course load. Like, I was taking evening classes, summer classes, evening and weekend classes. And I was also had a part-time job. So I was like super, like busy. And I wanted to kind of skip 2-3 grades in one, right? So I was going to start from 10 to 11, and then I went 12 and 13. So I checked off all my check boxes for the hardest stuff that I needed to complete high school, but I was missing some, grade 11, social sciences, some what I consider BS courses. And that, of course, I wouldn't qualify for a diploma. Meanwhile, there was only one university I wanted to go to. That was University of Waterloo, which is sort of like a Canadian MIT, right? It's one of the best engineering math schools in the world. And so I wanted to go there. And I did well on some competition that they organized. So I basically wrote a letter to the university, and I said, hey, you should accept me without a high school diploma. And so they turned around and contacted my teacher at high school, and they're like, who the hell is this kid, and who does he think he is? Because my teacher went to Waterloo. I didn't know that at the time. And so long story short, they accepted me, but they had to accept me as an adult student, because otherwise the computer would just kick me out, right? Like, there's just no way to kind of go in the normal route. So I was an adult student who was actually the youngest in the class when I got accepted into Waterloo. So that's kind of how I went around that.
Let me ask you a question. So you moved there. Like, how long did it take you to like where you felt confident in English? I mean, I think that's a pretty harrowing experience for probably most people. Like, move to a new country, flee a country that's all you knew. Your family's a total immigrant story, and then you end up like taking some crazy classes. You're gonna go into high school. It doesn't sound like you were there that long. Like, was your English like? When did you start to feel confident in your English?
I still struggle with that. Like, just having an accent is something that I'm always kind of aware of. I know people say, "Oh, it totally, works for you," and this and that. But like, subconsciously, like I wish I didn't have it. So it's always a little bit of a insecurity, if you will. So I don't know. But as a teenager in high school, it's sort of like sink or swim. You just kind of gotta like figure it out, and so it was fairly quick that I got the basics down.
Yeah. By the way, I love your accent, and I make jokes about it all the time. I go, I do this, Marko, just go into the parties and get totally fucked up. That's a bad version of my Marko accent, but I love your accent. I think it's fucking amazing. I do lots of impersonation. When we're partying, like Marko and I like to party together, and when he parties, his accent like goes up. His enthusiasm around partying is high, like mine, and his accent gets a little thicker, and so it's extra fun to do Marko impersonations when we're partying together. But we'll save that for later on in the show. So. Marko knows what I'm talking about. That's why he's smiling right now. So you went to Waterloo. You got in, obviously. And tell us about that experience. Did you like? I mean, obviously, also I would assume coming from, Eastern Europe, Serbia, former Soviet bloc country, right? Isn't Yugoslavia is a former Soviet? Is that correct or no?
No, it wasn't. It was communist, but it was
communist. That's right.
Western oriented. Yeah.
Yeah, so coming from a former communist country, yeah, I had that backwards. But having come from that part of the world, dude, there's high pressure on like math and science, right? Like that's like ingrained in the teaching system. STEM is like that. Like now it's China is like very famous for it, but back then it was like Russia, Middle East. Like, dude, my family in the Middle East was like science. The kids in like, my mom used to say like the kids in like elementary school were doing like high school math compared to the United States kids. So did you come in and you're like, oh, these fucking kindergartners here doing like algebra and you're like crushing math? How did you feel about like the difference in math?
Yeah, I was crushing it. To be honest, it was super easy. I remember like calculus was considered one of the hardest things in high school, and I've never studied it, so it was totally new to me. But I think it was like getting like high 90s on my tests, and I remember like a teacher would offer like you can fix one test and like retake it, and your choice of which one. And my lowest one was a 96, and I was like, I guess I'll fix that one, right? And everyone was like hating me in the class. They're like, who the heck is this guy, right? And so I was crushing it in high school that 1 year when I like took all this load and all that, right? And so I go to Waterloo, and I'm like, kind of, have a chip on my shoulder. I'm going, I know it's a really, good school with a lot of smart kids, but I didn't realize how much you have to actually do the work. Like what Eastern European countries reward is being smart, right? If you're smart, you cruise. But they only reward actually rolling up the sleeves and doing the work, doing the projects, like, doing the homework, etc. So I never had that muscle. And Waterloo was totally different. First of all, everyone was just as smart. And secondly, there was the work to be done. And I was struggling. I went from super cruising to like, I'm having a really hard time. I remember like by the time I dropped out, I think I needed 65% to be in a good standing. I had 65.2 or something like that. So, so I was like right at the border, barely surviving. Yeah.
This is in high school or at Waterloo?
Waterloo, so high school I had like high 90s, and then Waterloo was barely surviving.
So I read that Elon Musk once he chose between Queens College, I think Queens College and Waterloo, and he said he chose Queens College because there were so few girls at Waterloo. Would you agree with that statement?
It was terrible. We would get rated as the best academic school in Canada, but second worst in all of North America socially, or something like that. It was just pathetic when it came to like at least when I went there. I think it got much better, but it was not a place to meet chicks or hang out or party. I would find myself going to Toronto every weekend. I had my buddies there. I had a lot of fun back in Toronto.
Now Toronto like has like, especially like this is back in like you're 2 years older than me, so this would have been like the early 90s, like late, like you graduated college in what, 94, 95?
I dropped out in 99, so like mid to late 90s. Yeah.
You dropped out of college too?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No way, man. Oh yeah, that's right. Because I graduated in 2000. So so it was like your last year of college. You dropped out. You're like, oh, I'm over this shit.
Yeah. So yeah, because I ended up coming to California for a conference. Ended up starting a company, my first company, and then went back to hire a bunch of students, and things were looking really good. And so I was like, I don't need to bother with my fourth year. So I never finished my fourth year of Waterloo.
That's so funny, man. So I almost dropped out of college my third year. I was like, why am I doing this? I'm just going to go work for myself anyway. And my mom's like, oh, you need something to fall back on. So, but I also didn't have the skill set you have. You had an engineering background, math, science. I was, those weren't strange for me. So you came to California for a conference. Did you go to the Bay Area? Is that how you got to San Francisco?
Yeah, so a couple of things happened. So mid 90s, internet happened, right? Mosaic came out, World Wide Web, and Netscape, if you remember, was like one of the coolest thing on the block. And so I was studying computer science, and I was like, I was blown away. It's kind of like AI revolution now, if you will. I was blown away by the promise and the potential of the web, and along the ways, I started playing with this thing called Java. It was a programming language at the time, and I was also in a co-op program, which meant every summer I would have this, cool job where I get to like actually work in the field. So I started playing with Java. And one summer, I wrote some cool examples of some of the very first Java programs on the planet. And I showed it to Sun Microsystems. And they just started Java 1. It was the first conference. It was like, this is like this totally brand new space, right? And so the conference was in San Francisco. So they invited me to come for the summer to showcase this in San Francisco. And so that's what brought me to the city. And I came for the summer. I was like, oh my God, this is like, Kid in the Candy Store. This was like amazing, fun, awesome place with cool people. I was drinking from the fire hose when it came to like the culture and the tech and all that.
I didn't know that. So this is summer of 99. Going back to the
this is 97, I think. It was
this is before. This is before you left college. Okay, so right. you started coming to the Bay in like the peak, like 96, 97, 98, like 99 was when the shit started going sideways a little bit, 2000, right? Yeah. So that was like that was exactly, it was kind of like where we're at right now with AI, right? Maybe even a little bit like earlier. And so when you were in Toronto, did you get introduced to electronic music? Were you going to clubs and stuff then, or like when did you?
I listened to hip hop. I don't know if you can believe that, but yeah, I did not understand electronic music until I lived in Bay Area. Yeah,
that's not at all. So just so the audience says, Marko and I both love like electronic music. So, but he goes to way more parties than I do. I just quietly go every now and again. Now, so hold on. So, and I used to go to in the 96, 97, 98, I used to go in the Bay Area to those parties. But so you finally you're like, oh, why am I doing this? Like all these guys are getting rich over in the Bay Area, like doing this like tech shit. I'm out. And so you come to the Bay in 99. Was it to start your own business or for a job?
So the way it worked, I came for the summer work, right? And I was just, showcasing at Moscone Center, a Java 1 conference. And I was just blown away by San Francisco. And I met a buddy who was moved from Toronto, worked for Schwab. And he's like, why don't you meet my boss at Schwab and like, just have a lunch with him. And so I went to Schwab, and they basically offered me a consulting work. And so I basically dropped out of co-op at Waterloo, went back, did another, this was my third year. So I was finishing my third year, and I would come to work for Schwab for 4 months, right? And then while I was at Schwab, I kind of, had this idea. I was with my next cubicle coworker, and I was like, why don't we start a company? Like Java was coming out. We had an idea for an app that was sort of like it would be an intranet internal. We were going to compete with Lotus Notes at the time, but it was going to be all written in Java and this like really cool tech. And so I had a short stint at Schwab, and then I dropped out and started a company. So around late 90s. And then kind of started the company, went back to finish my last semester of Waterloo, which was my third year semester. And during that time, I was recruiting other students. And I was like, I'm just going to like go all up and to the right. Like life is good. I'm just going to, hire students, raise money, sell this thing for multi-million dollars in no time. And, retire somewhere in the Caribbean with a little, drink with a little umbrella on it. And that was kind of like what I was thinking. Of course, it didn't work out that way, but
but a lot of that's happened. I mean, not in those orders, but so what was the name of the company that your first company you started that in the late 90s?
Decosoft.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Decosoft. So the idea was to the web sucked initially. It was just these static pages, and so there was technology started to evolve where you can actually still have dynamic content right in the page. Right, so that meant you can run apps in the browser. Like that was novel, right? So we kind of envisioned like, well, what if I could have a spreadsheet right in the browser? So essentially, we wrote that. Like you could write a spreadsheet, a little drawing app. Like we wrote all this sort of like early sort of apps that ran right in the browser, and they would like sync up to the cloud, to the server in the cloud, and so that was Decosoft. It was basically going to compete with Lotus Notes and become your intranet where you can, store cool information internally within a company.
So what happened to Decosoft? I've never heard about this business.
Yeah, so we raised angel money. So we hired a bunch of people. We kind of did all. We went up and to the right until .com crashed, and we sort of crashed and burned along with that, and we solved it.
So you moved to San Francisco in '99. You start Decosoft. It goes up into the right. March of 2000 happens. For people that are younger, they have no idea. Like March 2000 was kind of like what happened in 22 a little bit, but I would say even way worse. And so like it was a ghost town in San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco, by the way, in September of 01, and it was a ghost town then because of what had happened in 2000. So what happened? The business goes under, and then you're like, all right, well, I live here now. I mean, were you able to get like a green card? Like how did that work?
No, I kind of, I figured this whole immigration system with U.S. Canada. So I was on a NAFTA visa, which I was kind of like abusing year after year. I just figured out the loophole, and so immigration wasn't as much of an issue. The issue was that like I just didn't have any money, right? Like there was no work. We went from, to your point, there was so much money in the air, like. Every day there would be a launch party with like free sushi and Mick Jagger playing in the back, right? To like ghost town overnight, right? Like literally, I've never seen bigger bust and boom and bust anywhere, and so a lot of people moved back. A lot of everyone who was a transplant, which is most of San Francisco, moved back to where they came from. But I kind of like resonated with the place, and I was like, okay, I'll just make it work. Like I don't really care about like I don't need a lifestyle. I just need to be here, right? I'll just live on credit cards and mac and cheese, and so that's what I did. I started just kind of bumming around, hoping that work will emerge, and in the meantime, just figuring out where I can go out every night for cheap and listen to good music, have some fun. So
yeah. God knows you've done a lot of that, and so how did that lead to what's next? Because was the next thing Americana, or did you like kind of like take jobs? Like what happened between Decosoft and when I met you in 07? I don't know this story.
Yeah, so it's a fun one. So there was no tech work. There was just like zero, dry, right? So meanwhile, I like to party. I discovered electronic music and all that. And so the biggest electronic music festival at the time was something called WMC, Winter Music Conference, and it happened in South Beach, Miami. And so I went there, and as you can imagine, like every night it's a mega party after mega party, and it's just 24/7 like that, and super super fun. And I had a buddy who was also a casualty of .com, and so he chose to travel around the world, spend time in Thailand and such because it was way cheaper than San Francisco, and of course nobody was working at the time. And so anyway, we meet up in Miami, and so I remember we have this like drunken 3 a.m. conversation somewhere on the beach right after clubbing, and it sort of goes like, like what do you want to do with life, right? And so we had this brilliant idea. Let's open up a club, right? Back in San Francisco. So after the festival, we went back to Bay Area. We knew people who could fund us for that, and we worked on this one project for probably 9 months. It was going to be like what's now Shape Up 5. I don't know if you know 440 Jesse Street.
No.
mezzanine.
I know Chez Papa. I know that, and I know mezzanine. Yeah, I know that stuff.
Yeah. So right next to mezzanine, there's a space. It's all the same kind of developers, and so we were going to open up a club, kind of like a bar gallery concept, similar to 111 Minna. And we worked on that for a long time. And 11th hour, they changed the terms on us, and the project fell apart. But meanwhile, one of the consultants to us opened up a place called the Canvas Gallery, which is on 9th Avenue in Lincoln. Now it's Pacific Catch. But at the time, it was like it was a 4,000 square foot bar, a gallery that wasn't a bar. It was a sleepy cafe with a gallery. And so we bought into that. Instead of opening up our own place to learn the ropes. So basically, my buddy Elliot came in. He owned the gallery. I owned all the events. And we transformed a sleepy cafe into a full-fledged licensed bar with a late night entertainment license. And so, during the day, it was like a place where everyone was on a laptop. It was one of the first places with a free Wi-Fi. Wall Street Journal wrote about us as the office of the future. Back then, like, you had internet cafes, but nobody did free Wi-Fi. We were like one of the first ones to do that. So during the day, it was like a really hopping sort of startup-y place. But then at night, we would have, everything from open mic to gallery openings to DJs and such. And there was some programming every night because we needed to really increase the revenue to pay for, exuberant lease that we had at the top of a .com signed, right? So I did that for a couple of years in my early 20s. Had a blast.
So I used to go to Canvas Cafe all the time. I think we've talked about this. My sister did a fashion show at Canvas Cafe in like 06, I think, or 05. So you've mentioned it. I thought you were just an investor. I didn't realize that was like your gig. So that's crazy. That was your gig. Okay. And so you did that for a couple of years, and then I'm guessing Americana was born right after that. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Americana was born I just always had this I want to build a tech business, but I don't know exactly what it's going to do. So I picked a name that doesn't really mean anything. It was the name of a soccer stadium in both Rio and Belgrade. And I just it's kind of like my sandbox to try something out. So that's kind of like, I kind of had it on the side, but it didn't really have any work. I would do random consulting here and there, like do some, web development. And then I remember coming across this ad in a Craigslist, and it was basically a nonprofit called OpNet that was creating opportunities for inner city kids, minorities, and women to start doing tech, right? So as opposed to being an inner city kid that's going to flip burgers or steal car stereos, why not learn HTML and JavaScript and actually start doing some freelance web development? Right? That was kind of the premise. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I started spending Saturdays there teaching kids how to, program initially PHP and then Java. And that's kind of how I sort of went back from running a bar, which, was fun, but nobody made any money on that, to actually kind of stepping back into the tech.
Interesting. So give us the quick rundown of what happened with Americana, because I know what happened to it, but essentially you built this company from nothing to your point right now. Give us a 60-second, the journey at Americana.
Yeah. So I'm working at this nonprofit, and then somebody says, you can do this corporate. I was like, really? You can do tech training corporate? I was like, I didn't even know it exists. So I put up a website, and SEO, search engine optimization, was new. So I put up a website, and then, to my surprise, I started getting calls from Williams Sonoma, Bureau of Land Management, these big organizations, right? And I start selling Java training. And then more and more. So long story short, we built a big tech training business, so tech services company. We would train on cutting edge open source technologies like Java, Scala, Hadoop, Android, to big organizations like Intel, Qualcomm, Motorola, DoD, etc., all over the world. And so we scaled that, and then Twitter acquired us.
So you grew the business from literally nothing just through kind of inbound, I'm assuming, and you're a good networker, so people kind of word of mouth. Was that really how the business grew, more or less?
It was all SEO. It was all search engine optimization. In like our phone was just ringing off the hook. We never did outbound sales ever. Like it was just, we figured out how to optimize it, and it was just we built a great mousetrap for leads. And when I say leads, like this is like, Cisco's and Intel's of the world would like call us up, and it was amazing.
That's amazing, man. I like I'm telling you, everyone out there should go start a podcast and interview all their friends, because then you learn a bunch of shit you didn't know. I mean, I was there for part of it. I didn't realize that was actually how you got all your business. It was just through like inbound SEO. So you guys scale the business. How big did you grow Marikana to? What was the biggest?
I think it was about 5 million at the time.
Yeah. So you drew to about 5 million in revenue. You end up selling the business. Like, and just so you guys all know, we told Marko not to sell his company to Twitter. This is a presentation that was in our forum. We're like, no, don't sell. You shouldn't sell the company. It was doing really well. You guys were making money and stuff. So, but tell us about the sale, because the sale's pretty cool, and the moment you sold was that really cool. I'd love if you'd share that story.
Yeah, and it's like the first thing, like, so as an entrepreneur, obviously one of the dreams is like one day you exit, right? Like, and I didn't really think it was going to happen to us because we were a services company, and then Twitter approached us about this acquisition, and I was like, first I was super flattered. I was like, oh my god, this would be amazing. But then as we started looking at the deal, to your point, at the time, like I owned most of me and my brother owned 100% of Marikana. We're like having all this cash, life was good. Like I can do whatever I want. I have all this income and so forth. And I was going to trade that for basically a whole bunch of privately held stocks. So Twitter was private at the time. At valuations I knew nothing about. Like it was just kind of random, like what it's worth. And I was going to get basically a job reporting to somebody. Like, so I was going to lose all the freedom and all the cash flow. And like, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to afford my lifestyle, like from a Twitter salary at the time. Right. Like, so,
how big of you don't have to give numbers, but like, just so the audience could get an idea, like what kind of a pay cut percentage wise did you take to go from you're running a CEO of your own company, $5 million company, like services company, anyone that understands can kind of do the back of the napkin math, to taking a job as the head of Twitter University and getting a bunch of like private stock that might be worth something someday. How much of a pay cut did you have to take up front for that?
Yeah, so I think there were like, I think there were years I was taking home back then like $1 million in salary, right, from Marikana, and plus in those days. And then at Twitter, I don't think anybody was taking home in cash pay more than 200K. So I was
80% plus, like, and it was more than 80 because I remember how much you're making. So over an 80% pay cut to take, like, it wasn't like you're getting paid in like Google stock. Google stock, by the way, back then was like, you would have been like, that's like getting paid in cash. Like Twitter, what year was this? 2010, 11?
So it was just before IPO. So I think we closed the deal in 13.
Okay, so 2013, and did you know that they were going to IPO? Were you like, all right, they're going to IPO really soon, so I got this in the bag?
Yeah, no, but that was such a closely held secret. Nobody knew, but then it got announced like two months after post our acquisition.
You're like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, well, you're kind of good, but also there was also the thing like, if there was a vesting that I didn't realize that you have to go through, and like essentially, you vest everything over multiple years, and there's a first year cliff. So basically, not only you're trading everything you built for a privately held stock, but if they kicked you out on day one or day 364, you end up with nothing.
Whoa,
right?
I didn't know that. So hold on, they hired you guys. They took your company, and you actually kind of spun the company out, right? We don't. So like, because they didn't really. It was an acquire. They just wanted your team to come do work on the engineering side. They didn't really like want the training business itself. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, they didn't want the business. They wanted a bunch of IP. So it was a little bit more than acqui-hire, but there was some IP like courses and such. But yeah, that was basically.
Wait, so I do remember that. So you had a vesting schedule, and I didn't realize. Did you get any cash up front when they bought the company, or was it like all stock? more or less?
Yeah, there was some cash, but it was not significant. It wasn't significant. It was just, I remember, like, luckily we didn't have to pay taxes on the stock up front. There's some rule where you can kind of avoid that because I wouldn't have that money. So I wouldn't be actually physically capable of like closing the deal if I had to, kind of pay the tax on the stock right away. So luckily that wasn't the case. But I remember my lifestyle at the time, I had a because I was dabbling in real estate. So I had like so many properties at the time, in California with huge interest rates and mortgages and so forth. And I was like, I couldn't even afford to live on a Twitter salary right at the time. So it was a stretch.
You're good at hiding it, man. I didn't realize that all that had happened. And so so you end up going there. How did you feel? Were you like, oh, this is the best decision I could have ever have made? Or were you like fuck it, I'm just going to give it a shot and see what happens?
Yeah, so you know what I did? So first I looked at the finances, and you kind of know, like, it's kind of like take a blue pill or a red pill, right? And finances after a while become fuzzy, like, because there's so much risk. Like, I sort of knew how much I was going to be scaling up Arcana. I sort of knew how much I was going to get with Twitter, but finances really become fuzzy 5 years into the future, and you kind of had to and so I kind of canceled that out. I was like, screw it, I'll be probably okay one way or another. Let's not think about money. What I wanted to optimize for were three things, right? I wanted to see how a organization at that scale works. I've never had a real job before, right? So I kind of like, I was lonely working in a small little company. I wanted to see how big organization works. Secondly, I wanted to meet amazing people. And I was blown away by the caliber of like talent at Twitter. Like, everyone was a badass and they were like everywhere, right? And super available and all that. And third, I wanted to see what it takes to work on what I call the billion-person problems, right? Like, we were solving some small problems for some organizations, but Twitter was like causing revolutions at the time and stuff, right? So I really wanted. So those are the three things I went to Twitter for. So it wasn't a financial choice. It was more about like, I wanted to have this experience, and that I got. That was amazing.
I remember when you went there. So the cool thing about Marko joining Twitter, outside of everything he's saying, which is awesome, was that we started doing our meetings at Twitter. So we would do these monthly meetings at the Twitter off of Market when they're on 8th and Market. I believe it's 8th and Market. And and we walk in to these offices, and I'm coming, like, we're all like grindy startup bootstrap entrepreneurs. I mean, even me at that time, I had like 1,000-person company, right? But I had bootstrapped the thing. And there's like, in the middle of the office is a fucking cabin. They had like a log cabin, which was just like a room you could walk in and work from. And then they have this like insane like cafeteria where they have the chef coming out serving sushi and amuse-bouches. And I was like, what the fuck is this? I go to my buddy and I'm like, oh, I'm going to short their stock. But I was wrong, right? Because they actually like it did really well. Obviously, it's done really, really well since you got in there. But that was so cool for you to get to experience that. You were there for a couple of years. And then, tell us a little bit about you deciding to leave, because you were there for what, 3 years? Is that correct?
Yeah, I was there just short of 3 years, and Twitter was going through a riff. So basically, there's a peacetime company and there's a wartime company. When I joined, there was a peacetime company. There were all this like, we want to build all this, and like everyone's kind of like really looking long term and really focused on culture and building something meaningful and so on. And then we went public, and I think I changed like 3 managers in like a year or something like that. It was such a convoluted place. It became less and less fun to work with, and things that that we were working with became less and less important. Like I own open source. I owned Twitter University, Women in Tech, a couple other teams, and they were like ripe for cutting that, right? So it wasn't like super essential. It was nice to have. And so I basically had the option to leave and to accelerate some of my vesting. And I took that because I was like, I felt like I got what I wanted out of that. And I wanted to, I wasn't cut to be a CEO minus whatever in the company. I wanted to like really be back in a garage working on the next thing. So I basically left Twitter.
Man.
That was 2016 or so.
So tell us, you took some time and decided that, a lot of the things you learned in Twitter that you might be able to apply them outside of Twitter. Tell us a little bit about what is now Plus Plus.
Yeah. So first I was like, okay, maybe I'll just retire and like do nothing, right? Because I had the optionality of like taking a lot of time off, and I did what you would expect. Like I traveled a little bit, so family back home, went to gym every day, read every single book I could find, but it became boring, really boring after a while. Like I remember there was a moment where I was like, is there a bar that's open at like noon on a Tuesday? and I was like, I'm going to go to the dark side if I continue just doing nothing. So I was like, okay, I need a project. I need something that's going to keep me occupied. So then I was like, okay, I'll start something, but what is that? I already did the software, I did the training thing, and I started scratching all my itches. And so I was like, what if I do a VC work, right? What if I do a hardware company? What if I do? So I had like all this like what ifs, like, shiny object that I thought would be super cool. So I started meeting a lot of friends who were like doing VC, doing hardware, doing this and that, and kind of having explored like, what does that really look like? And so long story short, ended up full circle, realizing, going back to my purpose and things that I care about is I care about helping people get to the next level. So that's been my arc of my, kind of career, helping people elevate and get to the next level, unlock that through usually education. And second thing is I love building products, like especially scalable software products. So I was looking at the cross section of those two things. And so that's basically what was the genesis for Plus Plus. Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about that, because this time around you decided, obviously you did bootstrap it for a while to kind of get a proof of concept. You got it up to what, 1 million ARR, and well, first of all, tell us what Plus Plus is, and then I'd love if you can kind of give the 60-second overview of how you launched it and then your decision to go into a different direction of scaling it this time around as opposed to bootstrapping as you had done in the past with Americana.
Yeah, so it's interesting how I started it. So if you kind of think about the typical SaaS company, you start with a small customer, and then maybe you get mid-sized customer, maybe you get like a larger. So you sort of, everyone starts like small and tries to kind of make their way up to some known logo, if you will. I actually went to my peers who were my peers when I was at Twitter. So I went to a friend of mine at Salesforce, Jenny, and I was like, hey, I'm curious what's missing for you at Salesforce. She had basically what I had, the same job, but a different organization. And we would just have a coffee meetings, right? Like I would go to one Market Street and, to Starbucks, and first time she would give me some points. And so next week I would show up again for another coffee meeting, and I would bring us a slide deck with a couple of screens that I kind of, drew myself, right? And I was like, well, what if we had, screen like this, and this, like, would that solve? And she would be like, we would iterate. So a couple of coffee meetings later, she's like, this is it. Like these couple of slides that you have, this is it. Let's pitch it to the VP at Salesforce. So that's what happened. Like I basically pitched to a VP of Salesforce a slide deck that I built downstairs in the Starbucks, right? And they're like, all right, well, buy it if you build it. How much will it cost? I was like, I have no idea, right? Like I wasn't even incorporated, right? And so then I spent a year with a team in Brazil, and we built it, the first version, and, passed all the security and everything in Salesforce. And so my customer zero that became customer one happens to be one of the largest, tech companies in the world. We now serve, 15,000 employees there or something for like 8 years now. So
that's what I love is like, you're probably one of the only entrepreneurs on earth whose like first clients in his business were like Fortune 50 companies. Like your first business, like it was like these massive organizations like Sun Microsystems, like hitting you up to like train their people at Americana. And then over here, it's the same thing. I didn't even realize. And it's funny. I remember, because I'm in the, as listeners can imagine, I'm in meetings hearing about this stuff firsthand. And it was like, who's like first, I forgot, customer zero was freaking Salesforce. Like imagine your first, but I will say this, and what I think listeners need to pick up on is you went out very curiously and solved a problem that existed in that organization, which is like, that's why they chose it, is you leverage your network to figure out what problems you could solve at scale. So kudos to you, man. Like, that was like obviously very enterprising of you. Was that kind of like your thought, is like, hey, I'm just going to go figure out a problem that I can solve for a big company? Or was it just kind of happenstance that it happened that way?
It just kind of it just happened. Like, I knew that they had similar challenges we had at Twitter, and I kind of wanted to solve for them. And then I went to other, like, I cold called into Airbnb and sold to them. We cold called into Shopify, sold to them. Netflix, I went for a coffee meeting. I walked away with a check for $70K, which I thought was huge at the time, right? So like we started closing these deals like left and right, and it was like really amazing. Early success, and and to your point, I kind of bootstrapped this like 100%.
So you made a decision a couple years in. Obviously, you had some amazing, and how many right now? How many big logos are you guys serving? How many companies are you guys serving at Plus Plus?
Well, the ones that you would know, so Salesforce, LinkedIn, Airbnb, HubSpot, Squarespace, Roblox, Shopify. Those would be some notable.
And yeah, which is like the who's who of big tech businesses, and then some, which is freaking ridiculous. And being an observer, like when you're informed, we kind of talk about your business. It's like, yeah, I signed another logo. I just signed up Shopify. We're like, what? Like, this is like not even real. But you made a decision in the business that you hadn't done Americana, which you decided to take to raise like institutional capital. Tell our audience a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I always like kind of I was on the fence. I used to have this dilemma of like, I called it rhino versus unicorn. Like, what kind of a business do I want to build? Do I want to build a rhino, $100 million business, or do I want to build a $1 billion business? And there are trade-offs and advantages to each one. And so I wasn't super sure, but I always wanted to have that optionality. And then I was like, okay, well, I've never raised money in my entire entrepreneur career. Like, I always kind of did it sort of bootstrapped and so on. So I was like, I wanted to see what the experience is like. And so first I was like, okay, I'll raise a little bit from friends and family. So Darius, you were, one of my first supporters in terms of that. And I was like, this is actually kind of cool. Somebody keeps me accountable and I have to report, and like it becomes a different level of game. And I enjoyed that accountability, right? Like it pushed me, right? So we did after that with the angel round, and that was like super easy. I have my stories where I would take kids for ice cream. We live down close to Burlingame, and I would run into somebody, and like I would go home and have like a term sheet and check like in my email. So that's how easy it was, like raising angel around. But then I started trying to raise the institutional money, and that was the totally opposite experience. It became super, super hard for me to raise VC money at the time. So yeah, so we did it eventually.
Yeah, you were successful at it. Why do you think it was hard, and what did you do to overcome that?
So first of all, I never had experience. Secondly, the one lesson I learned is somebody told me, we went to StartX later on in one of the Stanford accelerators. And one of the lessons I got there is either sell a story or traction, but not both. And what I was doing is I was selling both. I was selling the traction, like, oh, look, we have all these logos and $1 million ARR. But then I would be like, here's this, and people weren't sure, like, do they judge us based on the traction because that was only so good, right? Or do they look at the story, which I didn't tell as grand as I could have, and so like I was kind of sitting on two toilets at the same time. In that process, and so I think that's what made it harder for me.
And so when you finally did raise the money, was it because you leaned on the traction, or did you lean on the story? Which one did you choose?
I think it was just pure hard work of like talking to everyone.
Yeah.
So I found an investor. It was New Year's. It was the holidays during pandemic, and Jenny from Freestyle, she's like, look, I want to close the deal. You fit. We got introduced to common friend, so that's the reference was great. She needed, we fit her financial what she needed, and that's what I also underappreciated, how VCs have to have the terms of the deal make sense, like the size of a check and the percentages and all that stuff. So we perfectly fit what she needed. And she saw in us a story that I myself didn't communicate well. And so that was kudos to her for actually seeing something that was there. And so we kind of inked this deal during holidays when nothing else was happening. So yeah, that was kind of fun.
That's amazing, man. And kudos to you, man. I was there. I got front row seats to this, but it was cool to watch you go through that. And if you were to characterize like two things, number one is what's your favorite part about taking on outside money is first question. The second question is what's the your BHAG with Plus Plus?
Yeah, so I think I remember talking to Jeff Berkland at the time, right? And I was like, well, he has all these startups as a CFO, and so he sees both bootstrapped as well as funded. And I was like, well, what's the difference between the two? And so his point was like, the ones that are funded tend to run a tighter ship, tend to run a bigger game, tend to be a little bit more serious and focused and so on. And so that's what I craved. So so that's kind of like what I got with institutional money. Like it kind of forced me to do my updates, have clarity of thinking, have clarity of vision. So there was just it elevated the game a couple of notches, and so. On the flip side, I think I lost that freedom of like, well, this is just my, lifestyle business. If I wanted that, so that's kind of what I got, and I really appreciate that experience. And so, our goal is to change how companies develop their people so that they do it deliberately as opposed to by chance. And we're seeing that the most advanced, most innovative organizations on the planet also happen to have the best culture. And it's not by chance, it's by choice. They're investing in their people. And learning happens to be one way to kind of build a culture. People tend to congregate around, those watering holes of like wanting their mastery, wanting that community, and eventually creating that culture of being innovative and successful.
I love that, man. And you guys are doing some amazing stuff at Plus Plus. So before we get off the show, I'll have you kind of give information for people that are listening that maybe want to learn more about Plus Plus. I got two more questions for you, and then I know we're running over on time. You got like 5 more minutes, or you got to run?
I'm good. Yeah.
You good? All right, cool. So it's 8:00 here, and I'm leaving for Cali in the morning, so I got to wrap up. But I do appreciate your time. All right. First question. So first of all, Marko is one of the most life maximizers. Like the way, like I have a group of people that I've become friends and with more and more what I call life maximizers. And the term, I stole the term from Bill Perkins, who wrote the book Die with Zero. He calls himself a life maximizer, and he does it at the level that he's like a guy that's probably worth a couple $100 million that lives like he's a billionaire. And you watch the shit he does, and you're like, dude, that is ridiculous. But Marko is like the same deal. Like he's a life maximizer. And the reason I say that is like he's always like pushing himself to do cool stuff, like interesting things, and not for like the reason some people do. Some people do that stuff. Like I hate when I watch people like take the pictures to post on Instagram. Like that's not the reason. Like that's maybe just like he's just like documenting what he does because he's like wants to like put it somewhere to keep, and that's why Bill does it too. But with Marko, it's like, you did what? You went where? It's and so you have this whole thing around doing epic shit like once a month. I think that's your cadence, right? Would you mind like telling our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I know myself as like I focus on work, and that's like 150% of my time, and I was terrible at planning anything, like terrible at kind of like I would come home with leftovers of energy, right? And so basically my free time was usually planned by others, right? Like where we go on vacation, what we do, et cetera, et cetera. So I wasn't in a driver's seat of that. And so I came up with this concept of epic experiences. So I started creating a list, and basically the goal was like one epic experience per month. And it's kind of, a little bit of that came from EO, right? Like, so like having some once in a lifetime experiences and kind of programming that. So I started creating a list, and suddenly I got kind of like really good at that. Things just kind of started dropping into the buckets, and it ended up being more than one often per month.
Give some examples of what would be an example. What's the last epic thing you did that you signed up to do?
Well, so this month was EDC in Vegas. So that was my first EDC electronic
Daisy Carnival. Yeah,
Daisy Carnival, which was crazy. So that was definitely an epic experience. Heli skiing would be another one. Burning Man would be another example. This month I'm going to Dubai and Turkey, so that's going to be this month's sort of epic experience.
What's like the biggest epic experience that you've done in the last 12 months? If you're like, this is like the number one most epic.
I would probably go with Burning Man, and even though it was my 8th one, it was the whole mud situation made it extra fun and interesting.
And what's been the biggest surprise epic experience where you did it and you're like, whoa, like I thought that was cool, but I didn't realize how cool it was going to be?
What comes up? I had a crazy story in Aspen in October where we almost died being stuck in a storm. So that was a surprising aspect of it.
It's one question though, because a lot of people are listening to this like, yeah, of course, you sold your company, you have all these resources, you can go and do all these things that I could never do. Like, what piece of advice would you give to someone that maybe doesn't have the resources that you necessarily have to do epic experiences? By the way, like, he didn't even name that he bought a plane last year, taught himself how to fly. Right, you're taking flying lessons, so this that didn't even make the list. and there's a ton of shit that I've done with him that is epic that didn't make that list either. So it's like he's just giving you like he's skimming the cream off the top, and there's about 8 more feet of cream under that cream. But yeah, tell us if someone doesn't have the resources of like a Darius or Marko, how would you approach it if it was Marko 2001 trying to do epic stuff?
I don't think it's necessarily money. I think it's ideas, right? Like I started just kind of curating a list, kind of like having a bucket list, and things just started popping up. Like, for example, I had heli skiing was always on my list, and my buddy Prem just one day was like, "Hey, we're thinking of organizing this trip a year from now. And we have a slot available. Are you interested?" I'm like, dude, like, that's on my list. So kind of like putting it out there to the universe, and then it just kind of shows up. And so like, yeah, that would be probably, that worked for me. Like, having a list of crazy ideas I'd love to see manifest.
I love that, man. And Marko was in the room when Ben Nempton spoke to us at MIT, who wrote like the bucket list journal. So I recommend I interviewed him, I think last year, or 2 years ago, maybe it was. So I would recommend maybe any listener that wants to like really get some good advice, check out Ben Nempton's episode. We'll put that in the show notes. Anything else to add? Tips to add to the audience on doing epic shit?
Just kind of being open to it, and it just manifests. And not everything needs to be super epic. It could be just like a family trip. Sometimes is epic, like being with parents up in Tahoe for Memorial Day. That was an epic experience for me. I think having gratitude and being present to it being epic is also what makes it super epic in itself, right? Because otherwise we can go through life and these things happen to us, but we're just not even acknowledging them.
I love it, man. All right, we're running over, but we're gonna go to the greatness question. You ready for it, my brother?
Sure.
All right, Marko, what is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
What comes to mind is having dreams, right? Like, what I realize is that dreams always come true, but often slightly slightly differently, and it's easy not to notice them. And it's also easy not to have them. And so creating a time and space to just dream up, to actually have a slack in a day where I can sit down and kind of meditate on like what would life by design be. So kind of giving that permission and creating the time and place to imagine. I think that's been an unlock for me.
I love that, man. So anyone that wants to connect with you, learn more about the work you're doing, wants to like learn about Plus Plus, how can they learn about Plus Plus? How can they learn about more about you, and where would they go to find those different types of things?
I am on Twitter or X as Marko G, MARKOG. Plus Plus is also there as Plus Plus. And plusplus.co is our domain name, and Marko at plusplus.co is my email.
All right.
So that works.
Brother, I appreciate you so much gratitude for the epic life that you're living and you sharing that with our audience. I had no idea that you're a double dropout. Now I know.
Yeah.
From double dropout to MIT, my friend. Man, so much gratitude having you here, Marko. I love you, my friend, and appreciate all the greatness you're bringing to the world.
Thank you, Darius. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
Have a good one.
You too, man. Until next time, everybody. Peace out. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.